Fantasy is the genre that everyone thinks of when they think of anime. It's basically the default mode for shonen action series, but even outside of those, playing fast and loose with the bounds of reality is something that goes hand in hand with the limitless potential of animation. With so many fantasy anime out there, it's no surprise that some great ones would slip through the cracks. To help you get caught up on those, I've compiled a list of 5 hidden gems that may or may not contain secret magical powers. Now, just to preempt some of the comments that I know I'm gonna get here, this being a list of hidden gems means that I'm not gonna be talking about big shows like Fullmetal Alchemist, Magi, Nanatsu no Taizai, or Avatar: The Last Airbender, which is an anime, fuck you, fight me. And I'm also gonna try to avoid well-known and oft-recommended must-see shows like Spice and Wolf, Mushishi, and Haibane Renmei that you typically see on a list like this. We're gonna go for deep cuts here. Although my first recommendation really shouldn't be as deep a cut as it is. There's a good chance that you haven't watched or even heard of Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water, which is a weird thing to say when you consider that it was directed by Hideaki Anno based on a pitch to NHK by Hayao Miyazaki. And for the most part, the show is exactly as good as that pedigree would suggest, an eccentric, globe-trotting steampunk adventure loosely inspired by the works of Jules Verne, packed to the brim with crazy, eminently likable characters. The Grandes Gang is one of the all-time best groups of villains in anime history, and there's something about the World's Fair steampunk flying machines seen throughout the show that I can't help loving. If you've played Inkle's 80 Days, this world has a similar charm to it. It's also overflowing with visual flair and countless references to other popular anime, and in that it bears the clear hallmarks of Anno's direction. This truly is classic Ghibli fused with classic Gainax. In tone and plot, the show has a lot in common with Miyazaki's Castle in the Sky. It's a story about a young engineer who is dragged along on a fantastical adventure after a chance encounter with a mysterious girl wearing an even more mysterious glowing blue pendant. And that makes sense since Miyazaki originally pitched Nadia in the 1970s and later went on to use elements from it in both Castle in the Sky and his directorial debut, Future Boy Conan. In that sense, it's sort of a prototype for the rest of Miyazaki's career, and that historical value alone makes it worth a watch. But what's crazy is that it is also responsible for the existence of Neon Genesis Evangelion. See, the production of this show was so stressful for Hideaki Anno that following its conclusion he fell into a deep 4-year-long state of depression, and he based the plot of Eva on that. Talk about making lemonade when life gives you lemons, huh? The biggest reason for that breakdown is also the one black mark against this series. Anno was so busy making the series finale that he simply didn't have time to direct all 39 episodes of the show. So for episodes 23 through 35, he passed the ball to his friend Shinji Higuchi, who proceeded to fumble the fuck out of it. For most of its run, Secret of Blue Water is a seriously great fantasy adventure, but episodes 23 through 35 are close to unwatchable. The quality of the writing and animation falls off a cliff, especially in the last few episodes set in Africa, an arc which concludes with a fucking clip show. Fortunately, only episodes 30 and 31 have any actual bearing on the plot, and the rest of the island arc, as it's known, is entirely skippable. You can catch everything that you need just by watching the episode recaps. And the 4 Anno-directed episodes that conclude the show are so worth the slog that it takes to get through them. I like to think of Nadia as a 29-episode-long series with 10 shitty OVAs, and in that light, I can't recommend it enough. The series just oozes a kind of nostalgic charm that many modern shows are lacking, and the plot takes some seriously interesting twists and turns along the way to its conclusion. Plus, a remastered version is available on Blu-ray from Sentai Filmworks, so you don't even have to subject yourself to low definition to enjoy it. Or you can watch the series streaming in HD on the Anime Network, assuming that you're willing to forego the hilarious 90s dub with its awful fake French accents. Seriously, it's great and you should watch that version. Unfortunately, you'll have no choice but to go with DVD quality for the next series I'm recommending, but that shouldn't deter you from watching what is, in my mind, the finest work of isekai fiction in anime. Now and then, here and there. This show starts as many upbeat shonen action series do, with a plucky young boy getting caught up in circumstances beyond his comprehension and whisked away to another world. If you've seen classic isekai shows like Monster Rancher and Digimon, you know exactly what to expect from here. Rape, child abuse, and murder. So much murder. Now and Then, Here and There is quite possibly the single most brutal anime ever made. It takes standard shonen tropes like an optimistic, headstrong protagonist and even a mysterious girl with a glowing blue pendant and tosses them into a desert wasteland ruled by an insane despot. And not the fun, campy kind of insane despot you expect from anime. King Hamdo is the genuinely crazy kind of insane despot. The kind of guy who'd kill his cat and then keep petting it for a while after. The kind of guy who builds his power base with an army of child soldiers. This show is a test of the human spirit. It takes a lot of mental fortitude just to get through watching it. But no one is tested harder than protagonist Shu Matsutani, and the question of whether his determined optimism will survive the trials he's subjected to is gripping enough to keep you watching despite the horrors that you're seeing. The rest of the cast is equally fascinating and the plot is enthralling. This is the kind of show that makes you think at the end of every episode, and leaves you staring ponderously into the void after its finale. Now and Then, Here and There will beat you down in every way that you can imagine, and I don't want to say whether you'll come out the other end better for it, but I will say that it is worth experiencing. Its subject matter may be ugly, but it is beautifully animated and impeccably directed, and what sparse music it uses will take your breath away. There's an emotional catharsis to be found in this show that few other anime can really match. Just be ready to suffer for it. If Grave of the Fireflies is an emotional obstacle course, then Now and Then, Here and There is a full-on 13-episode boot camp. Don't say I didn't warn you. I want to warn you about this next show as well, but honestly, I have no idea what I'd say. World Conquest's Zvezda plot is trippy. It's also arguable whether it's a sci-fi show or a fantasy show, but it has enough weird magic nonsense in it that I'm happy to recommend it as the latter. Zvezda is a sinister organization bent on world conquest whose 30-story tall top-secret headquarters are hidden in the backyard of a house in the middle of suburban Tokyo. The organization is helmed by Lady Vanira, aka Kate Hoshimiya, a little girl who just happens to be an ancient immortal who has been leading Zvezda in its quest for world domination for thousands of years. She solves most of her problems by turning her stuffed rabbit into a giant magic fist and smashing them. Like I said, it's a weird show. Kate is one of the most likable and genuine child characters I've seen in an anime in quite some time. She's adorably precocious and stubborn once she gets an idea in her head, no matter how ridiculous that idea might be, just like a real child would be. But she has the power to make her childish flights of fancy into reality, and we get to have fun alongside her. Zvezda is a motley crew of oddballs, including a beefy, skull-faced general, a sexy one-eyed samurai, and a robot bunny girl, opposed by the equally odd superheroes in the government organization White Light. Week to week, their forces do battle as Zvezda attempts to enact evil plots like getting everyone in the city to quit smoking, or taking a hot springs vacation. We see these events through the eyes of Jimon Asta, a young boy who runs away from home and ends up joining Zvezda as a generic mook. Of course, being one of the only two generic mooks in the whole organization, he ends up standing out just as much as his kooky superiors. Asta seems like a straight man intended to ground the rest of the show's weirdness, but as the show goes on, it quickly becomes apparent that he's just as kooky as everyone else. In fact, the whole world that Zvezda aims to conquer seems to be teetering on the brink of madness, for reasons that become apparent in an offhand background shot from episode 9 that would be treated like a huge revelation in just about any other show. As is appropriate given its young yet immortal star, World Conquest Zvezda plot tends to follow the logic of an 8-year-old playing make-believe, yet it treats these surreal happenings with absolute seriousness. Mundane activities get blown out of proportion into huge, world-shaking events, and then we get to see those events unfold through stunning, inventive animation. What this means, in a nutshell, is that the show is a barrel of fun. It doesn't really have any pretensions of telling a deep, compelling story, although it manages to deliver on some very satisfying character arcs throughout its runtime. Instead, it wants to take you along on a wild ride full of zany action and comedy. And on those fronts, when it delivers, Zvezda plot delivers. It has a manic energy to it, not unlike this season's Sakuga darling Flip Flappers. And like that show, each episode gives you the impression that just about anything could happen at any moment. Zvezda plot flew under way too many people's radar when it hit in 2014, and I'm hoping I can change that for at least a few of you. The series' overt silliness might be a turnoff for some, but if you're tired of conventional action anime, this may be the something completely different that you've been looking for. If you've ever listened to me talk for more than 10 minutes, you know that I love it when fantasy series explain how their magic systems work. If that kind of thing appeals to you too, then boy will you ever get a kick out of Scrapped Princess. One of the rare light novel adaptations to come out before the runaway success of Haruhi Suzumiya in 2006, Scrapped Princess was originally written by Ichiro Sakaki, who would later write Coffin Princess Chaika as its spiritual successor. Like Chaika, Scrapped Princess was also adapted into animation by Studio Bones, which means that it looks goddamn incredible. If you like Coffin Princess Chaika, there's a very good chance that you'll enjoy Scrapped Princess. And if you haven't seen Chaika yet, well, I guess you can count it as a bonus recommendation for this list. But I'm digressing. Scrapped Princess tells the story of, as the name suggests, a princess named Pacifica who is tossed off a cliff as an infant after a prophecy predicts that on her 16th birthday she will become the poison that destroys the world. Of course, it would be a pretty dang short story if she actually died there, so instead she's saved by a court wizard and adopted by a family of commoners, the Kasuls. The story picks up 15 years after Pacifica's supposed death, following her and her siblings Raquel and Shannon is a guy by the way, as they travel the world, evading the pursuit of religious zealots who wish to see her killed. Pacifica and her odd but loving adopted family form the emotional core of this story, and it's one hell of a strong core. Pacifica's a bit of a princess, which could get annoying, but she's good-natured and layered enough to make it worth seeing past her occasional brattiness. And I love the way that she plays off of Shannon's po-faced, rugged practicality and Raquel's slightly airheaded kindness. The rest of the supporting cast is strong and memorable as well, allies and villains alike. The cold, disaffected peacemakers who serve as the primary antagonists have a distinctly chilling presence in particular, and their ability to control the minds of any human they can see makes for some terrifying moments. But as great as all of these characters are, the biggest draw for me is the world. The continent of Dustfin is one of the most fascinating fantasy worlds I've ever had the pleasure of visiting through fiction, partly for the rich detail in which its culture is rendered, but mostly for the badass manner in which its magic is depicted. Like I said, this is a Bones production, so of course it has great production values, but that's just the half of it. The way that spells are cast, almost like wizards are forming circuits out of the mana in the air, is one of the coolest things the studio has ever conceptualized. Right up there with their depictions of alchemy in FMA and Trapar waves in Eureka 7. Now, it might seem like I'm focusing a lot on surface elements here, but that's only because I am. Scrapped Princess is a great story with a lot to say about human fanaticism and other things which I don't want to spoil. The journey that this anime takes you on is exceptional, but saying why beyond what I've said already runs the risk of undermining its charm. You also run that risk by reading the Wikipedia article, by the way, which is written very irresponsibly, or just about any review of the show. And I say that as someone who notoriously doesn't care about spoiler warnings at all. I'm not normally someone to say, watch this, just trust me, but if you're looking for something that'll hit you the way that FMA did, complete with great characters, a strong plot, and a little bit of body horror, then watch this, just trust me. And if you can hold off a little, watch the Blu-ray release that Funimation is putting out on February 28th. I can't begin to tell you how excited I am for that. I think I'll be more excited, though, if they ever put my next suggestion out on Blu-ray. But that's one heck of a long shot. King of Bandit's Jing is my favorite show that no one cares about, but I'm hoping that by the end of this video, at least a few of you will. As you may have gathered at this point, I have a soft spot for surreal elements in my fantasy series, and they don't get much more surreal than Jing. This heavily episodic, Burton-esque odyssey follows a scrappy young master thief as he travels a strange, twisted landscape, stealing treasures that are metaphorical representations of obscure philosophical concepts, as well as the heart of just about every girl he crosses paths with. Jing is joined and often assisted by Kier, a lecherous, smart-ass talking crow who can fuse with his arm and turn into a megabuster. This happens almost every episode, and it is never explained. A lot of stuff in this show is never explained, but that's kind of the charm. Every story arc is this weird, semi-metaphorical parable with a seemingly simple moral that gives way to complex, heady implications. If you've ever wished Kino's journey was like 10 times weirder, this may be the show for you. And that's not the only great anime that Jing may remind you of, either. Its art has this weird, twisted, gothic sensibility to it, not unlike Soul Eater, although as an early Studio Dean show, it can't even come close to matching Bone's animation on that. And much like FLCL, the studio handed the reins of the show's entire musical score to a small alt-rock band, in this case, Scudelia Electro. It's not really fair to compare the two soundtracks directly, since The Pillows is one of the greatest rock outfits to ever come out of Japan, but as is the case with FLCL, Scudelia Electro's musical direction lends Jing an unconventional yet consistent tone that distinguishes it from many of its contemporaries. In conjunction with the surreal visuals, it gives the show a hard-edged yet dreamlike ambiance that, for me at least, assists in maintaining suspension of disbelief as each episodic plot starts going off the rails. And thanks to this and some strong writing, the show never loses you no matter how bizarre it gets. Without any sort of overarching plot to focus on, the show relies heavily on the charisma of its two leads to compel you to keep watching. Thankfully, Jing and Kier are extremely likable and have great chemistry both with one another and the strange folks they meet throughout their travels. As a side note, almost everyone they meet is named after some sort of alcoholic beverage. Kier, for instance, is named for a French wine cocktail, and the first enemy they face is Mare Cognac. This has less significance than Scrap Princess naming every character after a firearm, but in a way it does serve to highlight the surreal atmosphere and intoxicated illogic of the show's world. King of Bandit Jing is not for everyone. It doesn't have any sort of deep underlying plot or grand message to convey, but it overflows with liquid charm, and it is one of the most truly fantastical fantasy series out there. That said, it's not the only fantastic one, and I'm hoping that I've helped you to find at least one show today that you think is worth a shot. If I have, let me know which one and what you think of it in the comments below. And while you're down there, tell me what shows you think that I should give a shot. Thank you for watching, and thank you especially if you're one of those awesome people who helps the channel out on Patreon. I wouldn't be able to do what I do without you. And in the new year, I'm planning on showing my appreciation for you guys in force. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate you sharing it with your friends. It helps the channel, and it might help them find some good stuff to watch as well. If you're more in the mood for something sci-fi oriented though, I have a list of 5 science fiction anime that are equally worth your time. Or if you're in the mood for some more in-depth, and I mean seriously in-depth anime recommendations, then I suggest checking out Super Eyepatch Wolf's Why You Should Watch series, starting with his excellent video on Mob Psycho 100. For now though, I'm Geoff Thew, professional shitbag, signing out from my mother's basement.